Shadows and fog can greatly enhance the mood of a scene, and they're easy to set up in SketchUp. Let's take a look at shadows first. If you're casting shadows of a building, it's important that you geo-reference the building so that it's oriented properly with respect to the sun. You can't create user-defined light sources in SketchUp like you can in some other 3D applications. Instead, SketchUp has a system for simulating the sun, and it's based upon the actual celestial mechanics of the Earth-Sun system. So it depends on the time of day, time of year, and exactly where you're located on the Earth. So this whole process starts by geo-referencing your site. I'm going to get into that in greater detail when I talk about Google Earth. This particular model has already been geo-referenced, and you can click this button down in the lower left corner to open up model info to the location page. Here we can see that the actual latitude and longitude coordinates of this particular church have already been set. I'd like to just verify that the north angle is correct, so I'll check Show in Model. Let's close this and zoom out, orbit around, and take a look. So this image was imported from Google Earth, and you can see right up here that this is the north direction. So it's properly oriented. This yellow line is coincident with the green axis, and it represents the north direction. Going back into model info, I can toggle this off, and we get the familiar green axis back. If you didn't want to go into Google Earth and geo-reference it there, you can do it manually in SketchUp by showing the axis in the model and manually rotating this value. You can go ahead and just type in a value, and you'll see that the north angle will alter. This affects the way that the sun casts shadows. In this particular example, this should be set to 0. I'll open the Shadows window and check Display Shadows. The top slider is for the time of day. The bottom slider is for the time of year, month/day. It's hard to see this from this altitude, so I'm going to orbit around and zoom in. This site is in the northern hemisphere, so the sun would be to the south, and the shadows cast will be on the north side of the building. And you can see the shadows move around as I change the time of day and the time of year. It's a great way to help you design your building and figure out where the sunshade should be and how big the windows should be and so on. It can also be useful when you're considering the shadows and how they might affect the neighboring structures. Fog is also easy to simulate. Open the fog window and check Display Fog. The two sliders here are on the same scale of distance that's measured from 0 at the picture plane all the way to infinity in the distance. Let me just orbit the scene so we can look off into the distance a little bit better. And the way you can read this is as follows. There's no fog from 0 up to this point. Perfectly clear. And then the fog starts to ramp up from 0% up to 100% right here. And then after this point, it's 100% fog. So everything would be completely obscured by the fog color. If you want to make a sudden change from no fog to full fog, what you need to do is pull these sliders closer together. This creates kind of like a wall of fog effect, where we have a very sudden transition where everything is obscured after that point. And you see, as I rotate around, this fog plane moves because it's really a function of distance away from the picture plane. A more realistic fog is one where these sliders aren't so close together. Separate them a bit to have more of a gradient between where the fog begins and where it transitions up to full 100%. As far as fog color goes, you can either use the background color as defined in the style, or you can uncheck this and set a custom fog color here. I'll change the color to more of a white by dragging the target to the center of the color wheel, and then I'll drag this up to have a higher value to make the fog a little bit brighter. So one of the reasons we use fog is to create this mood, this atmosphere, which is appropriate for this church. But another reason that we might use fog is to obscure things like what we see over here. This edge of this terrain is dropping off. And we want to kind of hide this illusion by pulling the fog in a little closer to us In the distance, maybe I'll pull this back a little bit so we can still see the church. But in this way, I can hide the edges of my environment to create a more convincing illusion.